Hello and welcome to Chapter 18, where we are discussing blood. So here's a list of learning outcomes from this first section that we're going to be discussing. So major components of different physical properties of blood plasma, viscosity, osmolarity, how blood is produced, etc., etc. We're going to be talking about the circulatory system, cardiovascular system, and hematology. So the main purpose of this whole thing is to transport substances from place to place within the body. Blood is going to be that liquid transport medium. The vessels are going to ensure the proper routing of that blood, and then the heart is the pump that keeps everything moving, right? Specific functions are transport, protection, and regulation, all of which we'll talk about a little bit more specifically. So blood is a liquid connective tissue composed, like other connective tissues, of cells and an extracellular matrix. The matrix is the blood plasma, which is this clear light yellow fluid consisting a little over half of the blood volume, and then the rest of that suspended within the plasma are the formed elements. So these are the cells and the cell fragments that include the red blood cells, the white blood cells, platelets, which are fragments of certain bone marrow cells, which we'll talk a little bit more in depth of. And then adults generally have about 4 to 6 liters of blood. Males will have a little bit more than females, and all of that, it could be due to body size, weight, amount of testosterone, etc. This is a good figure encompassing the different formed elements of the blood. So with the leukocytes include the granulocytes or neutrophils, basophils, the agranulocytes, the lymphocytes, monocytes. You see the little platelets, little tiny fragments there. You see monocytes. But we won't go into really major details here. We'll talk about this in depth throughout this presentation. So components and general properties of blood include blood fractionation. So this is separation of blood into its basic components. We see this the best with centrifuges and with blood coagulation. So red blood cells, they're going to be the heaviest. They're going to settle first, so you'll see them at the bottom, and you'll see plasma at the top of the tube. Now, in between that is this narrow zone called the Buffy coat, and that comprises of the white blood cells and the platelets. This is a really good example of that. So there's 55% of whole blood encompassed by plasma. You have the Buffy coat there in the center, encompassing less than 1% of whole blood, and then the erythrocytes, the red blood cells, at around 45% of whole blood. And the erythrocytes, leukocytes, and the platelets are the formed elements, where the rest of it is the plasma. So I really do like this components of blood image. So here we're discussing blood plasma, which is the liquid portion of our blood, not the formed elements. So the major component here is going to be the plasma proteins, and they play a variety of roles, including clotting, defending against different pathogens, so invaders, anything viral, bacterial, fungal, anything that can be seen as an invader to the body. And they transport other solutes such as iron, copper, other lipids, etc., etc. And there are 3 major categories of plasma proteins. We have albumins, so the smallest and the most abundant. So these are going to be encompassing most of our blood plasma. We have globulins and fibrinogen. Albumin serves to transport various solutes and buffer the pH of blood plasma, and it also makes a major contribution to to physical properties of the blood, including the viscosity and osmotic pressure. So we will talk about that here in a little bit. And its effect on these two variables can significantly affect the blood volume, the pressure, the blood flow. So really important piece here. Globulins are divided into three subclasses, so alpha, beta, and gamma globulins, going from smallest to largest. They play a variety of roles in solute transport and clotting and in immunity. And then we have our fibrinogens, so soluble precursor of fibrin. So this is the sticky protein that forms in the framework of a blood clot. So fibrinogen is majorly involved in the clotting process. So in addition to everything we talked about, blood plasma also includes nitrogenous wastes. So these are the toxic end products, most abundant of which is urea. Urea is normally removed by the kidneys, and that is what our urine is, right? Urea is our nitrogenous waste. It also transports nutrients absorbed by the digestive tract, including glucose, acids, fats, cholesterols, lipids, phospholipids, vitamins, minerals. It transports dissolved oxygen, carbon dioxide, nitrogen. The dissolved nitrogen typically doesn't have a big physiological role in the body, but electrolytes, so this is an important piece. Sodium ions constitute about 90% of plasma cations. So what does this mean? So this means sodium is more important than any other solute in the osmolarity of blood, right? So this has a major influence on volume and pressure, and people with high blood pressure are usually told to limit how much sodium they're eating or drinking, putting into themselves, because these different concentrations can increase or decrease blood pressure. If you guys have high blood pressure and you've been to the doctor, I'm sure that you've heard, hey, watch all the salt that you're eating, right? And that's because of this. All right, now we're moving on to two important properties of blood, the viscosity and the osmolarity. So what is viscosity? Viscosity is thickness, right, or stickiness of a fluid. In simple terms, honey is going to be more viscous than water. Mineral oil is going to be more viscous than water, right? Whole blood is 4.5 to 5.5 times as viscous as water. So blood is thicker than water. And then plasma is 2 times as viscous as water. So this is, showing you the difference between whole blood viscosity, our formed elements, and then plasma. Red blood cells and albumin are the major contributors to blood viscosity. As we talked about, plasma is that liquid layer, and the red blood cells encompass the formed elements. Moving on to osmolarity, so this is the total concentration of solute particles in the body. This transfer of fluids depends on a balance between the filtration of fluid from the capillary and reabsorption by osmosis. So the rate of reabsorption is what governs the relative osmolarity of the blood versus the tissue fluid. So if blood osmolarity is too high, the bloodstream is going to absorb too much water. So this raises the blood volume, which results in high blood pressure and a potentially dangerous strain on the heart and arteries, right? So your aperture is the same and you got too much volume trying to push through. It has to push through at a higher pressure, right? Conversely, if the osmolarity drops too low, then too much water remains in the tissues, and blood pressure can drop to dangerously low levels because water is lost from the bloodstream. So in terms of osmolarity, you want to have a good balance. This brings us to colloid osmotic pressure.